It's funny how you can just get settled into a routine. Not in a lazy way, but just comfortable. Like you know the exact timing of the traffic lights on your commute. You know which floorboards creak in the office hallway. You know exactly how long to microwave your lunch. That was me, Sarah Miller. 42 years old, divorced, raising my amazing twins, Leo and Maya, and working my tail off as the lead innovation architect at Apex Solutions. It's this tech consulting firm in Denver, big offices downtown, likes to talk a big game about being visionary. For 6 years, that was my world. And honestly, I thought I was safe there. Secure. Turns out, sometimes the things you rely on most are the ones that can pull the rug right out from under you. It all started so quietly, just a few little things that felt off. But that's how it begins, isn't it? They tell you not to let your job define who you are. Easy to say, right? But when you're rebuilding your life piece by piece after a divorce that pretty much wiped you out, when you have 2 teenagers depending on you for everything, braces, college funds, groceries, your job feels less like an identity and more like a lifeline. Felt like survival. And I was good at my job. Really good. I wasn't just punching a clock. I was building things, solving problems other people couldn't touch. I loved the challenge, the complexity. I poured everything I had into it. Late nights? Standard. Missed school events? More often than I care to admit. Heating up frozen dinners while prepping client presentations? That was just Tuesday. The biggest project, the one I was most proud of, was for this potential client, Innovatech. Huge potential partnership, worth something like $22 million. It was the biggest deal Apex had ever chased. And the proposal? That was mine. My baby. I spent months on it. Deep dives into data models, intricate risk assessments, mapping out every single line of strategic direction. I lived and breathed that project. I sketched ideas on napkins during dinner, woke up in the middle of the night with solutions clicking into place. It wasn't just work. It felt like a part of me. I finalized the whole pitch document about 3 weeks before the big presentation. Every detail polished, every projection double-checked. I felt proud. Really proud. Like, this is it, Sarah. This is the one that puts you on the map here. The day before it was due to go to the client, I walked past my boss Mark Sterling's office. And there it was. A printed copy of the Innovatech proposal sitting right on his desk. I glanced down and my name was gone. Just vanished. Wiped clean off the title page, off the executive summary, out of the methodology section where I detailed my proprietary modeling approach. It was just gone. My stomach just dropped. I poked my head in. "Hey Mark," I tried to sound casual, pointing at the document. "Just noticed the cover page. Is there a formatting change or?" He barely looked up, waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, that? Just procedure, Sarah. Standardizing the templates. You'll get credited internally, don't worry." He smiled, that quick, tight smile that never quite reached his eyes. Internally? Right. I felt this cold dread creeping up my spine, but what could I do? Argue? Accuse my boss of erasing my work right before the biggest pitch of his career? He already had this way of making me feel small, like I was overthinking things, being too sensitive. He'd said it before, kind of sneering, "You're smart, Sarah, really smart. But you don't have that killer instinct." Maybe he was right. Maybe I should have made a scene. But honestly, I just felt numb. But here's the thing Mark didn't know. That little voice, the one that sometimes whispers warnings in the middle of the night, I'd actually listened to it. A few days earlier, just on a hunch, I'd emailed myself a full timestamped copy of the real strategy file from my personal account. Every draft, every revision log, the metadata, even the original mind map file I'd created months ago, titled Innovatech Predictive Expansion Model /S Miller /11-03. I saved it all. Not because I was planning some big revenge plot, not at all. I saved it because I believe in protecting what you build. Because something in my gut just told me to. Fast forward 3 weeks. The Innovatech deal closed. Huge celebrations at the office. Champagne speeches about teamwork and vision. Mark Sterling was the hero of the hour, taking bows, shaking hands. My name? Never mentioned. Not once. Not even in the internal memos. Stung. Badly. But I swallowed it down. Told myself, okay, it's corporate life, maybe this is just how it works. Keep your head down, keep doing good work, it'll pay off eventually. Right? Wrong. 5 days ago, Mark called me into his office. End of the day. Snow was starting to dust the windows outside, that soft, quiet kind of snow. The office always smelled faintly of citrus-scented cleaner. Trying too hard to smell fresh. The heater hummed quietly. He didn't ask me to sit, but I did anyway. He stayed standing, leaning against his ridiculously oversized desk. Sarah, he started, looking not quite at me, but somewhere over my shoulder. We need to talk. My heart started doing this weird slow thud. Look, he continued, picking up some papers from his desk. The company's restructuring. We're making some tough decisions. Streamlining. New directions. He slid the papers across the desk towards me. Termination papers. Just like that. Like he was handing me a bar tab. This is just business, Sarah, he said, finally glancing at me. His eyes flicking down to his expensive watch like he had somewhere more important to be. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. The words just hung there in the air, thick and cold. 6 years. 6 years of late nights, missed school plays, solving crises the executives couldn't even understand, let alone fix. 6 years of pouring my heart and soul into this place, into building things, into making him look good. And now? Erased. Disposable. I just sat there stunned. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My throat felt tight like it was closing up. The citrus smell felt suffocating. Corporate betrayal. That's what it smelled like. I'm sorry, Sarah, he offered again, his voice smooth, practiced. Like he'd rehearsed this. We need new perspectives moving forward. New perspectives. No. What he needed was a scapegoat now that the deal was landed. What he needed was to make sure the person who actually created the winning strategy wasn't around to contradict his narrative. He needed a clean slate so he could take full, unchallenged credit for my work. I forced myself to stand up. Slowly. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees. I focused on keeping my face completely neutral. Blank. I could feel him watching me, waiting. Probably expecting tears, yelling, begging. Anything. But I had nothing left to give him. Not my anger, not my pain. Nothing. Thanks for the insight, Mark, I said. My voice sounded surprisingly cool, distant. Even to my own ears. I didn't ask him why my name was stripped off the Innovatech proposal. I didn't ask why my 6 years of loyalty and hard work meant nothing. I already knew the answers. He thought he was winning. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He had no idea about the timestamped file sitting securely in my personal archive. He had no idea who the new CEO of Innovatech actually was. He just saw me as collateral damage. Easily removed, easily forgotten. A junior HR rep I barely recognized walked me back to my desk. My things were already packed. Stuffed into a plain cardboard box. Framed photos of Leo and Maya. A couple of notebooks filled with ideas, my favorite coffee mug. The one that said, "She builds, she leads." The irony wasn't lost on me. My key card was already dead. My email account wiped clean. Like I'd never even existed there. The walk through the hushed office, past colleagues who suddenly couldn't meet my eye, and then down to the chilly parking structure felt like the longest walk of my life. Each step echoed. I got into my old Subaru, the cold vinyl of the steering wheel seeping into my fingertips. I just sat there for a long time, staring straight ahead. The numbness was starting to wear off, replaced by this heavy ache deep in my chest. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It felt like if I started, I might actually shatter into a million pieces. It wasn't just the shock of the layoff, though that was bad enough. It was the betrayal. Knowing I'd handed Mark Sterling my best work, My most innovative thinking, gift wrapped on a silver platter. And I trusted him. That's what hurt the most. I'd actually believed him when he said my contribution would be recognized. How could I have been so naive? Driving home felt surreal. The streets were slick with slush, windshield wipers struggling to clear the freezing drizzle. Each swipe felt heavy-labored, like my own breathing. All I could think about were the twins, Leo's upcoming college applications, Maya's orthodontist bill sitting on the counter, the one I kept meaning to pay. I thought about all the client presentations I'd stayed up late prepping while they ate frozen pizza. The bedtime stories I'd missed because I was buried in analytics reports. All the sacrifices I'd made, believing it was building towards something secure, something lasting. For them. And then I thought about Mark's words again. You don't have killer instinct. Maybe he was wrong about that. Maybe killer instinct wasn't about being loud or ruthless. Maybe it was about something quieter. Like patience. Like meticulous preparation. Like knowing when to hold your cards close. That night, the snow kept falling, piling up against the windows of my little apartment in Denver's Highland District. The world outside felt muffled, quiet. Inside, though, something was starting to spark. A tiny ember of defiance in the middle of all the shock and hurt. After the kids were asleep, Leo had fallen asleep on the couch, waiting for me, bless his heart. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and opened my personal laptop. The glow of the screen felt different tonight. Not like work, but like potential. I logged into my encrypted archive, the one nobody at Apex even knew existed. And there it was. Everything. Drafts, revision logs, metadata showing creation dates, and author attributions. And that crucial file, Innovatech Predictive Expansion Model /S, Miller /11-03 p.m. Clear as day. My work. My intellectual property. I hadn't saved it all to be vengeful. Honestly, that wasn't my first thought. I saved it because I learned a long time ago, maybe the hard way through the divorce, that you have to protect what's yours. You have to be your own advocate because sometimes nobody else will be. And then I remembered something else. Something important. Mark Sterling wasn't the only player in this game. The Innovatech deal wasn't just with some faceless corporation. They had just appointed a new CEO. A woman named Grace Chen. And Grace Chen, well, Grace and I went back a bit. Years ago, back in maybe 2015, when she was launching her first startup, I'd done some freelance consulting for her. Helped her build out her initial market segmentation model. She was sharp, driven, and incredibly ethical even then. I remembered something she said to me once over coffee. Sarah, Shed said, the builders, the ones who actually create the value, they always get buried in the corporate shuffle. But not if I'm in the room. Not on my watch. She didn't know me anything, not really. It was years ago. But she believed in fairness. And she was now the CEO of the company Mark had just lied to. The company whose future strategy was built entirely on my work. My hands were shaking a little as I pulled up my contacts. Her name was still there, pinned from years ago. I opened a new email window. Stared at the blank screen for a long moment. What could I even say? Subject line. What should the subject line be? I typed. The real author of your proposal. Bold? Maybe too bold. But true. I started the email. Dear Grace, you may not remember me, but... I hesitated. Deleted it. Started again. Grace, congratulations on the new role at Innovatech. We worked together briefly back in 2015. No, too formal. Finally, I just typed what felt honest. Grace, Sarah Miller here. We worked together on your Series A segmentation model years ago. I'm reaching out because I was the primary architect of the Apex Solutions proposal you recently received for Innovatech. My former employer presented it without attribution after terminating my position. I felt you deserved to know the origin of the strategy. I've attached documentation for context. Simple. Direct. Terrifying. My finger hovered over the send button. What if she didn't remember me? What if she didn't care? What if this made things worse? But then I thought about Mark's smug face, about the termination papers, about Leo and Maya. I owed myself this shot. I owed them this fight. I took a deep breath and clicked send. And in that single click, sending that email out into the quiet, snowy night, everything started to change. Maybe I hadn't vanished quietly after all. Maybe they underestimated me. Maybe that killer instinct Mark thought I lacked was just hidden, waiting for the right moment. That night was long. I barely slept. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, watching the streetlights cast shifting shadows on the walls. Every little sound made me jump. I could hear Leo's soft snores from the living room couch where he'd finally drifted off. I felt this pang of guilt that I hadn't told the kids yet. But how could I? I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't want to worry them until I had something solid, something real. Until I knew if the ground beneath us was going to hold firm or give way completely. My phone was on the nightstand face down. I resisted the urge to check it every 5 minutes. Just breathe, Sarah, I told myself. You did what you could. Now you wait. Morning came slowly. Gray light filtered through the blinds. The smell of coffee started drifting from the kitchen. Leo must be up. And then at exactly 7 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not a notification ping, but a distinct buzz. An email. My heart leaped into my throat. I fumbled for the phone, my hands suddenly clumsy. The sender, Grace Chen. The subject, the real author of your proposal. I held my breath and opened it. Sarah, it began. I absolutely remember you. Your segmentation model was brilliant. We still use variations of it today. Thank you so much for reaching out. I've glanced at the documents you sent. Frankly, I'm not entirely surprised, but I am disappointed. Let's talk today if you're available. I have some questions. And potentially an opportunity you might want to hear about. Opportunity? I sat bolt upright in bed, nearly knocking over the glass of water on my nightstand. Wow, this wasn't just a polite acknowledgement. This was real. Grace Chen wasn't just anyone. She was a rising star in the tech world, known for her integrity, her sharp mind, and her absolute refusal to play the usual corporate games. And she wanted to talk. Today, my mind raced. What questions would she ask? Could I answer them clearly? What opportunity could she possibly mean? I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm the adrenaline surging through me. Okay, Sarah, focus. You know this work inside and out. Just be honest. Be yourself. I emailed her back immediately, suggesting a time that afternoon. Her assistant replied within minutes, confirming the call and providing a conference line number. The hours leading up to that call felt like weeks. I tried to work on my resume, tried to look at job postings, but my mind kept circling back to Grace. What would she say? What was at stake? Finally, 3 p.m. arrived. I sat at my small kitchen table, laptop open, notes spread out, though I barely needed them. My work was etched into my brain. I dialed the number, my pulse hammering in my ears. Her assistant patched me through instantly. Sarah, Grace Chen here. Her voice was exactly as I remembered it, calm, clear, but with an underlying intensity. Laser-focused. Grace, thank you so much for taking the time. I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course, Sarah, she said. I've had a chance to review the materials you sent more thoroughly. The original proposal draft, the metadata logs, the mind map file, it's compelling. There was a pause. I held my breath, waiting. And frankly, she continued, it confirms a nagging feeling I had during Mark Sterling's presentation. Oh, I managed. Yes. Something felt rehearsed, polished, but lacking depth when I pushed on certain implementation details. Now I see why. She paused again. I'm furious, Sarah. Furious that Apex would operate this way, and furious that your work was misrepresented. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thank you for saying that, Grace. Honestly, I wanted you to know. The strategy you bought wasn't created by the person who sold it to you. I built it. From the ground up. Of course you did, she said. And there wasn't a shred of doubt in her voice. I recognized your structuring style almost instantly. The way you layer the risk analysis, the clarity of the predictive models. It's too clean, too nuanced to be Mark's. I've seen his work before. This has your fingerprints all over it. Wow. She remembered my style? After all these years. Then she started firing questions. Fast. About revenue sensitivity thresholds, about Phase 2 implementation timelines, about the contingency layers for market volatility. Specific, technical, deep dive questions. The kind only the actual architect could answer fluently. I didn't hesitate. I didn't need my notes. It flowed out of me. Every assumption, every calculation, every strategic rationale. It was my work. Every line, every model, every single diagram. I owned it. I could feel my confidence building with each answer. The validation in her brief ma'ams and exactlies. After about 20 minutes of intense Q&A, she finally said, "Okay, I've heard enough. Sarah, I'm terminating the $22 million contract with Apex Solutions. Effective immediately." My heart literally slammed against my ribs. You're terminating the contract? I don't do business with thieves, Sarah, she stated, her voice sharp as steel. Then it softened slightly. But I also don't believe in letting brilliant work go to waste. Especially work like this. Another pause. I could hear her shuffling some papers on her end. Erase the opportunity one mentioned, she said. Innovatech is launching a new strategic ventures division, focused on exactly the kind of predictive expansion modeling you specialize in. We need someone to lead it. Someone with vision, integrity, and a proven ability to build from scratch. She paused, letting the words sink in. I want you to lead it, Sarah. As partner and CEO of this new subsidiary. It's yours if you want it. Partner. I blinked, speechless. My brain struggled to catch up. Me? Just days after being discarded like yesterday's news? You've always had a mind for buildings, Sarah, Grace continued gently. I saw it years ago. Now it's time you had the space, the resources, and the title to truly lead. I can give you that. But I need an answer fairly quickly. We need to move fast on this. I stared out my apartment window at the Denver skyline. The building's hazy in the late afternoon light. It felt unreal. All those years spent executing someone else's vision, carefully phrasing my ideas so they sounded collaborative, shrinking myself down so I wouldn't seem threatening. And now this? Grace, I need a little time to think about it, I said quietly, even though my heart was screaming yes. 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 It was just so much. So fast. I understand, she replied kindly. Take the night. But Sarah? Don't take too long. You deserve far more than being a footnote in Mark Sterling's story. Or anyone else's. The line clicked, disconnected. I sat there frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. The silence in the apartment felt huge. The word echoed in my mind. Partner. Leader. I thought of every single late night. Every weekend sacrificed. Every time my insights were subtly repackaged as team contributions in meetings. I thought of Mark's dismissive wave, his condescending tone. I thought of his parting words. This is just business. Nothing personal. Maybe it was. Maybe this was how the real world worked. Until someone like me, someone pushed too far, decided it wouldn't. Not anymore. That evening, I finally told the kids. I sat on Maya's bed while she was doing her homework, Leo hovering in the doorway. I explained that I'd lost my job at Apex. Maya's eyes grew wide, searching mine. They fired you, Mom? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Leo looked instantly worried. They did, sweetie, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, reassuring. I reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. Apex let me go. But why? Leo asked, frowning. You were the best one there. It's complicated, honey, I said. Sometimes companies make decisions that don't seem fair. I hesitated, then decided to tell them the rest. The hopeful part. But it might be okay. Something else might be coming. Something better. Maya looked skeptical. Are you scared, Mom? She asked, her voice small. I looked at her honest, worried face, at Leo's protective stance. And I couldn't lie. Yes, I admitted. Yeah, I am scared. It's a big change. But I took a breath. Im also ready. Ready for whatever comes next. The next morning, the fear was still there. A little knot in my stomach. But underneath it was something else. Resolve. Clarity. I picked up the phone and called Grace Chen. Grace, I said, my voice clear and steady. Amen. There was a smile in her voice. Good, she said, all business again but warm. Excellent choice, Sarah. Your new title is CEO Chun Strategies. That's the name of the new subsidiary. I've already started the paperwork. CEO Chun Strategies. Sounded right. Just 2 hours later, my phone started buzzing uncontrollably. News alerts. LinkedIn notifications. Texts from former colleagues. The news had hit the wires, faster than I could have imagined. Headline. Innovatech terminates $22 million Apex Solutions contract amid ethics concerns. Cites misrepresentation. Another read. Sources say Apex leadership blindsided by contract cancellation. I couldn't help but smile. Just a small one. I pictured Mark Sterling's face reading those headlines. The shock. The panic. But my small moment of satisfaction was quickly overshadowed by what happened next. The very next day, an email landed in Grace's inbox. It was from Mark Sterling's executive assistant, desperately requesting an urgent call to discuss the unfortunate misunderstanding regarding the Innovatech contract. Damage control time. Grace, bless her directness, simply forwarded the email to me. Her note attached was brief. He wants to talk to the CEO of the Innovatech strategic venture. That's you. Your move, Sarah. My move. Right. My heart started pounding again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else. Focus. Maybe even a little bit of that killer instinct Mark thought I lacked. I had Grace's assistant set up the call for later that afternoon. I spent the time preparing not notes about the strategy but notes about what I wanted to say. What I needed him to hear. When the call finally connected and I heard that familiar, smooth voice on the other end, Mark Sterling, sounding tight, anxious, I sat up straight in my chair, took a slow, deliberate breath and said, clear as a bell, Mark, this is Sarah Miller. You're speaking with the CEO of Chun Strategies. There was a beat of perfect, stunned silence on the other end. Then I heard a shallow intake of breath. Sarah. He stammered. I wasn't expecting you. I thought I was calling Grace Chun. I figured, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level, calm, controlled. You were trying to reach the CEO of Chun Strategies, Innovatech's new strategic venture partner. That's me now. There was this strange little sound on his end, almost a chuckle but strangled. The kind of noise someone makes when the ground has completely vanished beneath their feet and they're free-falling. Sarah, he tried again, attempting to regain his composure. His voice suddenly syrupy. Wow. This feels like a really big misunderstanding. A communication breakdown somewhere. I had absolutely no idea there was any tension between you and Apex leadership when you left. If I'd known you were still somehow involved with Innovatech after the restructuring, I certainly would have handled things differently. Still involved? Handled things differently? The audacity was breathtaking. I let the silence stretch out deliberately. Let him squirm in it. You didn't know? I repeated slowly, making each word distinct. Mark, you personally removed my name from every page of the Innovatech proposal I wrote. You presented my months of work entirely as your own original strategy. And then, after the deal closed based on that work, you called me into your office and fired me, calling it restructuring. But sure, Mark. You didn't know there was a problem. His voice immediately shifted. The false friendliness vanished, replaced by defensiveness. That corporate shield went right up. Now wait a minute, Sarah. You know how these things work. The board was putting immense pressure on us for profitability. Cuts had to be made across the board. It wasn't personal, it was a business decision. He paused, then added, his tone hardening, gaining a nasty edge, and frankly, while you're a talented architect, Sarah, a good builder, you were never really leadership material. You don't have the strategic overview for that. It hit me then. Harder than it should have, maybe. Not because I believed him, not anymore. But because it was the same old song. The same dismissive narrative I, and probably countless other women, had heard before. Too quiet. Too focused on the details. Too analytical. Too reserved. Always too something, and yet somehow never quite enough for the corner office. You're making a huge mistake here, Sarah, he pressed on, sensing my silence, mistaking it for weakness. Not just by doing whatever this is with Grace-chan. You're burning bridges. Think about your future. Think long-term. Think about your kids. And that was the moment something inside me snapped. The carefully controlled calm cracked just enough. You don't get to mention my children, Mark, I said, my voice dropping, becoming ice cold. Quiet but absolute. You lost that right. And let's be clear. I'm not burning bridges. I'm building new ones. Stronger ones. Ones built on integrity, not theft. There was another long pause. Then a sigh. Heavy, weary. You used to be different, Sarah, he said, almost sounding wistful. You used to be grateful. Grateful. That word. Like every late night, every innovative solution, every bit of success I brought to Apex was some kind of charitable gift they bestowed upon me. Not something I earned through skill and hard work. No, Mark, I said, my voice steady again. I wasn't grateful. I was loyal. Loyal to a fault, maybe. But that loyalty ended the exact moment you decided I was disposable. The moment you stole my work and showed me exactly what you thought I was worth. I took another breath. And honestly, Mark, I'm not the one who should be worried about the future right now. You are. And with that, I ended the call. Just clicked the button. No goodbye. No further discussion. Done. Later that day, I met Grace at her stunning office downtown. Glass walls, minimalist design, incredible views stretching across snow-dusted Denver. But it wasn't the fancy space that struck me, it was the energy. People moved with purpose. Conversations hummed with collaboration. There was this vibe, like people didn't just work there, they belonged there. Felt alive. For the first time, walking into an office didn't feel like entering enemy territory. Felt like coming home. I told Grace about the call with Mark. She listened intently, nodding. You handled that perfectly, Sarah, she said when I finished. A small smile played on her lips. But brace yourself. People like Mark Sterling, the ones who feel entitled, they don't go down quietly. Expect backlash. She was right, of course. By Thursday, the whispers started. Subtle at first, then gaining traction. Rumors swirling on LinkedIn. Filtering through private Slack channels and back channels from former colleagues I was still connected with. Friends started messaging me cautiously. Hey Sarah, you seeing this stuff? Mark was already spinning a new narrative. The official Apex line, unofficially circulated, was that I'd left Apex Solutions voluntarily for a new opportunity. That my performance had been slipping in recent months. That I was, quote, bitter about the restructuring and maybe a little unstable. Difficult to manage. Oh my gosh, it was so textbook. So predictable. So utterly infuriating. And exhausting. That afternoon, I sat down and started organizing. Everything. Emails with positive feedback from Mark himself. Performance reviews, the real ones before they were mysteriously downgraded. Project completion logs showing my direct contributions. Client testimonials naming me specifically. For 6 long years, I had meticulously, almost obsessively, archived every milestone, every deliverable, every documented piece of praise, every quantifiable metric of impact. Not because I ever thought I'd be in a legal battle, but because I'm the kind of woman who always keeps the receipts. It's just how my brain works. That night, I got a message from Chloe, a sharp marketing strategist I used to grab coffee with sometimes at Apex. She'd always been straight shooter. Sarah, her message read, I don't know if you've seen the crap being said online, but it's bull. Total bull. We all know you carried that team. We all saw Mark take credit for your ideas constantly. Just wanted you to know I've got your back. And if you ever need someone to speak up, officially or unofficially, I'm in.
No hesitaste.
Chloe wasn't the only one. By the end of the weekend, my inbox held over a dozen similar messages.
E-mails, LinkedIn demais, texts.
From former coworkers still stuck at Apex walking on eggshells. From others who had left long before me, carrying their own stories, their own scars from that toxic environment. Credit stolen, promotions blocked, ideas dismissed or co-opted. You were just the first one he actually pushed out the door after taking something so big, Chloe said in a follow-up message. But now that you're out and fighting back, some of us are finding our voices too. We're ready. Wow. By Sunday night, I didn't just have my personal archive of evidence. I had a growing chorus of support. I had potential witnesses, screenshots of internal chats, redacted memos being discreetly forwarded, whispers turning into a potential storm. And the best part? I didn't even need to deploy any of it directly just yet, because the ground was already shaking over at Apex Solutions. The termination of the massive Innovatech contract hadn't stayed quiet. On Monday morning, their publicly accessible investor relations site posted an urgent business update. The Innovatech contract termination was confirmed. Revenue forecasts for the next 2 quarters were drastically slashed. Their stock value, which had been climbing steadily, slid 6% by lunchtime. And then an email arrived that I truly never expected. It was from an anonymous internal address at Apex. The subject line, holding on. The message was short. Sarah, this is off the record, completely untraceable. But the board has convened emergency meetings all weekend. An internal investigation into executive conduct, specifically Sterling's, has been opened. There's serious talk of a leadership transition. You didn't just walk away with a new job. You exposed the rot that so many of us knew was there but chose to ignore. Thank you. Signed simply an ally. I read that anonymous email 3 times. My hands, which had been trembling just days ago, felt steady now. Mark Sterling had told me I was making a mistake, burning bridges. But sitting there reading that message, watching the fallout ripple outwards, it was becoming crystal clear. The real mistake wasn't leaving Apex. The real mistake was staying loyal for as long as I did. Believing things would get better on their own. Waiting for fairness in a system designed to protect the powerful. By the following week, the whispers about Apex had exploded into full-blown headlines in the business press. Top tech consultancy loses flagship client amid scandal. Apex Solutions faces crisis after leadership fallout, ethics questions raised. Innovatech CEO cites misrepresentation in Apex contract termination. I watched it all unfold from my makeshift home office, a quiet corner of my living room, coffee cup in hand. My phone buzzed constantly with news alerts, DMs from reporters, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Each notification felt like a small, quiet chime of vindication. Not because I wanted revenge, not really. It wasn't about seeing Mark fail. It was about the truth. The truth they tried so hard to bury. The truth they tried to bury me with was finally relentlessly clawing its way to the surface. And it wasn't just my truth anymore. Meanwhile, at Chun Strategies, things were moving at lightning speed. Grace and I were building the team, handpicking brilliant, ethical, razor-sharp people. Some were folks who had quietly resigned from Apex right after I was fired, unwilling to stay in that environment. Others came through Grace's extensive network, People known for innovation and integrity. Every single person we brought on board shared one common trait. They were tired of the old games. They were ready to build something better, cleaner, smarter. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I wasn't just executing someone else's half-baked vision or fixing someone else's messes. I was designing the blueprint. I was setting the tone. I was leading. Felt amazing. Exhausting, yes, but incredibly empowering. Still, that little voice of caution hadn't gone completely silent. Grace was right. Mark Sterling wasn't the type to just vanish quietly into the night. He'd fight dirty. Sure enough, that Friday afternoon my phone rang. It was Laura Friedman, the sharp, no-nonsense employment lawyer I'd consulted right after being fired, just to understand my options. "Sarah," Laura said, her voice flat, all business. "You're not going to love this." "Okay," I said, bracing myself. "Go ahead, Laura. Apex Solutions just filed a cease and desist letter against you." I sighed. "Let me guess. Accusing me of stealing proprietary data?" "Worse," Laura said. "They're accusing you of using Apex's proprietary information, namely, the Innovatech strategy, to deliberately poach their client and launch a competing firm, Chan Strategies." I actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, but a short, sharp burst of incredulous air. It was so predictable, so desperate. "You mean," I said, "they're accusing me of stealing the strategy one wrote? To poach the client whose CEO contacted me because she knew Apex had lied? The client I had a professional relationship with years before I even joined Apex?" Laura snorted softly on the other end. "Exactly. It's a classic scare tactic, Sarah. Pure intimidation. They want you to panic, maybe get scared enough to shut down Chan Strategies, or at least sign some restrictive non-compete. They want you to fold." Well, I said, feeling a surge of resolve. They picked the wrong person to try and scare. Let them try. "That's what I figured," Laura said, a hint of approval in her voice. "Don't worry, we're already on it. We documented everything meticulously when you first came to me, remember? The timeline, the emails, your original files. We're not just going to sweat this C&D down, Sarah. We're filing a countersuit. Immediately." "Countersuit?" "Absolutely," Laura confirmed. "Wrongful termination based on retaliation. Defamation given the rumors they're spreading. Intentional misrepresentation of your work product. Breach of good faith and fair dealing. And yes, we already have signed, dated witness statements from several former Apex colleagues corroborating your account and detailing a pattern of similar behavior by Sterling. We're going on offense." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the Denver skyline again. Just a month ago, I was sitting in this same spot, reeling from being fired, terrified about paying the bills. Now I was CEO of a promising new venture, and we were preparing to legally challenge the very company that tried to erase me. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about reclaiming my name, my work, and rewriting the ending not just for me, but for everyone who'd been silenced. What surprised me most, though, wasn't how quickly Apex escalated things legally. It was the sheer number of people who quietly, bravely showed up for me. Like Ben, a brilliant senior data strategist I'd mentored when he first joined Apex, fresh out of grad school. He messaged me late that night on Signal, the encrypted app. "Sarah," his message read, "I've been quiet for too long, just trying to keep my head down here. But I can't anymore." I knew what Mark was doing with the Innovatech pitch. We all did. You were the engine behind every single successful strategy this division ever launched. We watched him take the credit time after time. I feel ashamed I didn't speak up sooner. Then he added, "Attached is a detailed timeline I compiled from internal server logs. It shows the exact dates and times your author attribution was removed from the Innovatech project files and replaced with Mark's. Every edit, every version change. Use it if you need to. Please." Then came an email from Jessica, a former HR representative who'd left Apex about 6 months before I was fired. She'd always seemed uncomfortable during those corporate RAR meetings. Sarah, she wrote, I resigned from Apex because I couldn't stomach the ethics anymore, especially from leadership. I wanted to tell you, Mark Sterling directly pressured the HR team to alter your performance evaluation scores the quarter before you were let go. Your official rating was exceeds expectations based on peer reviews and project outcomes. He had it changed to meets expectations. He was deliberately laying the groundwork to justify your termination later, even though your performance was stellar. I have copies of the original drafts before they were altered. Let me know if Laura needs them. Even though ID suspected something like that might have happened, seeing it confirmed in black and white, wow, it still stung. Not because I ever believed their manufactured justification, but because it revealed the cold, calculated intentionality behind it all. They hadn't just dismissed me. They had actively worked to erase my documented value, to build a false narrative brick by brick. But now, piece by piece, testimony by testimony, document by document, I was reclaiming the truth they tried so desperately to bury. Laura Friedman wasted no time. Within days, she filed our comprehensive legal response and the countersuit. It included everything: my original timestamp proposal drafts, the server log timeline from Ben, the altered performance review evidence from Jessica, screenshots of internal communications, my archived email chains with Grace Chun proving she initiated contact, and legally sworn signed witness statements from 5 credible former Apex colleagues. It was an avalanche of documented proof. The cease and desist order from Apex? It was quietly withdrawn within 48 hours of our filing.
No explanaschen. No negociaschen. No epalegi.
Just silence. And that silence, that sudden deafening silence from their high-powered legal team, that felt like the clearest confession of all. They knew they had nothing. They knew we had everything. They knew they'd been caught. The following week felt like a turning point. The legal threat had evaporated. Chun Strategies was gaining momentum. Grace and I presented our official launch deck to a select group of potential clients and impact investors, people known for backing ventures with strong ethical foundations. Our pitch was simple: a strategy firm founded and led by women, grounded in transparency and data integrity, committed to building sustainable, long-term success for our clients, not just chasing flashy quarterly wins based on smoke and mirrors. You could feel the energy in the room. It crackled. People were leaning in, asking smart questions, genuinely excited. By the end of that afternoon, we'd secured our first 2 major client contracts. Signed, sealed, delivered. Riding the elevator down from that meeting room, I felt this complex wave of emotions wash over me. Pride, definitely. Relief, absolutely. But also this quiet kind of grief. Grief for all those years I spent playing small, waiting for permission to lead, waiting for validation from people like Mark Sterling who were never going to give it. Grief for the time I'd lost believing the system was inherently fair if you just worked hard enough. I used to think the corporate structure, the hierarchy, was this massive, unshakable thing. But standing there with 2 signed contracts in my briefcase, I realized the truth. The people doing the actual work, the builders, the innovators, the problem solvers, they hold the whole thing up. And when enough of them decide to walk away, or when they refuse to be silenced, the structure starts to wobble. It starts to fall. That evening, picking Maya up from her after-school program felt different. Usually I was rushing, stressed, my mind still back at the office. But today I felt present. She climbed into the passenger seat, tossing her backpack onto the floor, and gave me that big, wide, no-holds-barred smile she has. "How was your day, sweetie?" I asked, pulling away from the curb. "Good," she said, buckling her seatbelt. "My art teacher asked us today to draw someone who inspires us." "Oh yeah? Who'd you draw?"
I glanced over here.
She looked at me, her expression serious, proud. "I drew you, Mom." My throat suddenly felt tight. "Me? Why me?" "'Cause," she said, matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because you didn't let those mean guys at your old job stop you. You just started your own job. And now you're the boss. I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes, even though they were stinging a little. It wasn't just that she saw me, saw my struggle and my fight. It was that, for the first time in a very, very long time, looking through her eyes, I really saw myself too. Not as the victim, not as the discarded employee, but as the boss, as the builder, as someone who didn't give up. By the end of that first frantic month, Chun Strategies wasn't just surviving, it was making waves. We officially onboard those first 2 major clients. And then, get this, one of them was a direct competitor to Apex Solutions, a company Apex had been trying to land for years. The irony? Oh, it was delicious. The same firm where Mark Sterling told me I lacked executive presence, the same firm that tried to erase my contributions, was now watching from the sidelines as I led strategy sessions with Fortune 500 leaders. Confident, clear, and completely, utterly in control of my narrative. But here's the surprising part. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. That initial anger, that burning sense of injustice, it had shifted, transmuted into something else, something more constructive. It became about reclaiming the space I deserved, about proving that leadership doesn't have to look like Mark Sterling, all ego and bluster and taking credit. Could look like me, quiet strength, deep expertise, ethical grounding. It was about redefining what power and success could look like when it wasn't filtered through layers of corporate gatekeeping and systemic bias. Still, things took another turn when the first journalist called. Not from a trade publication, but from a major Denver newspaper, an investigative reporter. She wanted to do a feature, not just on Chun Strategies, but on the whole story. The Apex fallout, the Innovatech contract, my firing, the countersuit, the whole tangled mess. The article came out a week later. The title stopped me in my tracks. From Discarded to Disruptor: How Sarah Miller Turned Termination into a Tech CEO title. The reporter had done her homework. She'd talked to sources, dug into the timeline, knew about the retracted cease and desist, even quoted lines from some of those internal Apex memos and witness statements that had somehow found their way to her. I'm not trying to pick a fight, I told her carefully during our phone interview. I just want the truth out there. But more than that, I am done pretending that what happened to me at Apex was normal or acceptable or just business as usual. Because it wasn't. And I know for a fact that I'm not the only person, especially not the only woman, who has experienced something like this. When that piece went live online, the response was overwhelming, explosive. My email inbox, my LinkedIn messages, even my voicemail filled up. Hundreds of messages pouring in. Many were from women in tech, in finance, in law, sharing their own stories of being overlooked, undervalued, having their ideas stolen, being pushed out after speaking up. Others were from men, disillusioned professionals tired of toxic workplaces rewarding the wrong behaviors. This gave me the courage to finally file my own complaint. Your story is my story, same game, different names. Thank you for not staying silent. Honestly, I should have felt powerful, triumphant maybe, vindicated. But instead, reading those messages, I felt this incredible weight. The weight of responsibility. Because it hit me with full force. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never really had been. This was about something much bigger. A systemic issue. A cultural reckoning. And somehow my quiet little fight had ignited a spark. Now the whole industry seemed to be watching. 2 days after the article dropped, my lawyer Laura called again. Okay, Sarah, she said, predictably, Apex has hired a high-powered crisis PR firm. They're scrambling to get ahead of this narrative now that it's public. I expect some kind of official statement any day now, trying to smooth things over. Let them, I replied, feeling strangely calm. The truth is already out there. But it wasn't just a bland corporate statement they issued. It was a fool and charm offensive. A glossy blog post on the Apex website titled, Moving Forward, Learning from the Past, Building Stronger Together. It was a masterpiece of corporate airbrushing, full of vague apologies for unspecified past missteps, promises of renewed commitment to core values, talk of leadership evolution. No names mentioned, of course.
No specifics.
But the subtext, the attempt to paint the Innovatech situation and my departure as isolated incidents now being addressed, was crystal clear. And then Mark Sterling re-emerged. Not with a counterstatement, but with something much slicker. A podcast interview. Of course. Some industry podcasts focused on leadership challenges in tech. I listened to the clip online, my stomach twisting. You know, Mark said, his voice smooth as silk, earnest, almost convincing. I think we live in an age where people are sometimes very quick to assign blame, to create villains. Look, have I made mistakes in my career? Absolutely. We all have. Building a successful company is incredibly challenging. Tough decisions have to be made. He paused, letting out a thoughtful sigh. But sometimes people misinterpret those tough decisions. They take things personally. And unfortunately, not everyone is cut out for the pressure cooker of high-stakes leadership. It requires a certain resilience, a certain temperament. It was so perfectly rehearsed, so calculated in its deflection and subtle victim blaming. I almost had to admire the sheer audacity. Almost. He was painting himself as the beleaguered leader making tough calls, and me as the overly sensitive employee who couldn't handle the heat. But what happened next? Even I didn't see this coming. That same night, after the podcast clip started making the rounds, I got a LinkedIn message request. The name stopped me cold. Eleanor Vance. Eleanor Vance was one of the original co-founders of Apex Solutions, years ago. A legend in the Denver tech scene. She'd retired quite a few years back, well before I was promoted to lead strategist, but her name still carried immense weight, immense respect. I'd never even met her. Her message was brief, direct. Sarah Miller. I've been following the news about Apex with deep concern. I read the article about your experience and I listened to Mark Sterling's podcast interview today. I believe you. If you would be open to it, I would like to meet with you privately. Wow. Eleanor Vance? Believed me? Wanted to meet? My fingers trembled slightly as I typed back, Ms. Vance. Thank you for reaching out. Yes, I would be very open to meeting. We met the next morning at a quiet old-school cafe in Denver's Capitol Hill district, far from the downtown tech buzz. She looked older than her photos, her sharp dark hair now mostly silvered, but she carried herself with this incredible poise, this quiet command. There was no pretense about her. Thank you for meeting me, Sarah, she said after we ordered coffee. I stepped down from the Apex board about 5 years ago, shortly after Mark took over as CEO. She stirred her coffee slowly, her gaze distant for a moment. I started seeing decisions being made, directions being taken, that I just couldn't stand behind ethically. A shift in culture. But she sighed, looking directly at me now. I told myself it was just growing pains.
I didn't dig deeper.
I wasn't brave enough to challenge him then. And I regret that deeply now, seeing what he's done. You knew he was like this? I asked quietly. I suspected, she admitted, her voice tinged with regret, but no defensiveness. Just stark honesty. I saw the potential for it. The ambition unchecked by integrity. But I didn't act. You weren't the only talented person he tried to erase or marginalize over the years, Sarah. You were just the first one who had the evidence, the connections, and the courage to hold him fully accountable on such a public stage. Then she reached into her elegant leather briefcase and pulled out a small, unmarked flash drive. She slid it across the table towards me. These, she said, her voice low, are copies of internal board meeting minutes, executive performance evaluations, including Mark's, and sensitive email transcripts from my final 6 months on the Apex board. They document discussions about managing out high-performing but difficult staff, concerns raised about Mark's leadership style that were ignored, and early plans for restructuring that prioritized optics over people. They will back up everything you've claimed, and more if you decide to take this fight further. I picked up the flash drive, my hand suddenly cold despite the warm coffee cup beside it. It felt heavy, significant. Why? I asked her, looking her straight in the eye. Why give this to me now? Eleanor Vance met my gaze without flinching. Because, she said simply, it's long past time the truth had more advocates than excuses in our industry. And because you, Sarah, reminded me what real leadership, brave leadership, actually looks like. Use it. Or don't. That's your call. But the truth deserves to be known. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, two women from different generations, linked by the same flawed institution, sharing a moment of unexpected, quiet solidarity. That night, back in my apartment, after the kids were asleep, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. My heart pounded as I clicked through the files. Eleanor hadn't exaggerated. It was all there. Unredacted board minutes discussing the need to quietly remove high-risk staff before a potential IPO review. Internal emails where Mark explicitly discussed using layoffs as a media diversion tactic to bury other negative news. Altered performance evaluations for other senior staff members, not just me. And a chillingly detailed file labeled Project Nightingale Restructure Plan, outlining criteria for termination that clearly targeted experienced, higher-paid employees who might ask too many questions, labeling them potential liabilities. I wasn't fired because of my performance or because of restructuring pressures. I was fired because I was perceived as a liability, because I knew too much, because I built the very thing they needed but couldn't control, because I might eventually question the narrative. It wasn't just business, it was calculated elimination. The next morning, my hands steady now, I encrypted the entire contents of Eleanor Vance's flash drive and sent it securely to my lawyer, Laura Friedman. Her response landed in my inbox just 3 minutes later. 3 words, "Oh my God," followed by, "We need to talk now." When we spoke, Laura was practically vibrating with intensity. "Sarah," she said, "this changes everything. This isn't just about your wrongful termination anymore. This is evidence of systemic fraud, misrepresentation to the board, potentially even securities violations if they were prepping for an IPO based on false premises. This is huge. We need to take this public. Not just to the press this time, but formally. Regulatory bodies. This isn't just your story anymore, Sarah. It's bigger. The question is, are you ready for that?" I stared at the rain starting to streak down my office window. Ready? Was I ever truly ready for any of this? No, probably not. But was I prepared? Was I determined to see it through? Absolutely. The decision wasn't made lightly, but it felt inevitable. Necessary. Over the next weekend, Laura and I meticulously went through every single document again, mine, the witnesses, Eleanor's. We cross-referenced dates, names, internal policy codes. We built an undeniable, irrefutable case file. We weren't just trying to expose one bad boss anymore. We were aiming to set a precedent, to show that this kind of behavior has real, tangible consequences. On Monday morning, 2 things happened simultaneously. First, Laura submitted the full, explosive story, along with a comprehensive evidentiary folder containing key documents from the flash drive, to the Rocky Mountain Ledger, Denver's most respected investigative journalism outlet. They guaranteed source protection for Eleanor but verified the authenticity of the documents. Second, Laura filed formal, detailed complaints with both the Colorado Department of Labor and the Federal Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, citing intentional employee misrepresentation, wrongful termination, creation of a hostile work environment, and potentially deceptive disclosures to investors and the board during strategic review cycles. I thought I'd feel panic setting in as we hit send on those filings. Instead, what washed over me was this profound sense of calm, clarity. Like a massive weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying had just been lifted. It was done. The truth was out, not just in the court of public opinion, but in the hands of regulators. Within hours, the Rocky Mountain Ledger story dropped online. The headline was devastating. Apex Solutions accused of retaliation, Fraudulent practices in whistleblower complaint. Leaked internal docs reveal pattern of deception. The article detailed not just my story, but the evidence from Eleanor Vance, the corroborating accounts from other former employees, kept anonymous but details verified, the specific allegations filed with the DOL and SEC. Just like that, the narrative shifted irrevocably. I wasn't just the woman who got fired and started her own firm anymore. I was the whistleblower who had ignited an industry reckoning. My phone didn't just buzz this time, it practically melted down. 3 straight days of nonstop calls, texts, emails. Journalists from national outlets. Lawyers representing other former Apex employees. Consultants and executives from Seattle to Boston, sharing their own Apex horror stories or just offering support. Industry analysts wanting comment. Some messages called me brave. Others warned me I'd committed career suicide by taking on such established power. But to me, sitting there amidst the chaos, it felt like the only path forward. Necessary. On Wednesday morning, Grace Chun walked into my still temporary office space at Chun Strategies carrying 2 large coffees and grinning from ear to ear. "Well, Sarah Miller," she announced cheerfully, placing a cup in front of me. "Looks like you officially broke the internet. And maybe Apex Solutions along with it." I managed a tired smile. "That wasn't exactly the plan," I replied, taking a grateful sip of coffee. "Exactly why it worked," she said, her smile softening as she sat across from me. "Seriously though, how are you holding up through all this?" "Really?" I paused, considering it. "Exhausted," I admitted honestly, "but also strong. Clearer than I've felt in years." Grace nodded slowly. "I always knew you were the type to shake things up eventually, Sarah," she said quietly. "Back when we first worked together, I saw that meticulous focus, that refusal to accept easy answers. I just didn't expect the ripple effect to be quite this seismic." She wasn't exaggerating. By the end of that week, the fallout at Apex was catastrophic. 2 more senior executives resigned abruptly. Anonymous sources confirmed to the press that yes, the board had been aware of concerns about Mark Sterling's conduct for months, possibly longer, and had chosen silence over action. A former HR director, emboldened by the leaked documents and the public outcry, stepped forward and went on the record with the Ledger, confirming a systematic effort at Apex to deliberately downgrade performance reviews of senior women and suppress internal complaints about leadership. And Mark Sterling? Apex's legal team issued a terse public statement. Following an internal review, Mark Sterling has been placed on immediate, indefinite administrative leave, effective immediately. No golden parachute announcement. No carefully worded press release praising his contributions. His LinkedIn profile vanished overnight. No more podcast interviews. No spin. Just silence. Utter complete silence. But I didn't feel triumphant. Not even a flicker of gloating. Watching the empire crumble wasn't satisfying in the way I might have imagined months ago. Because this was never truly about revenge. It was about recognition. It was about accountability. It was about finally validating the contributions of all the quiet architects, the diligent fixers, the behind-the-scenes problem solvers who get taken for granted, exploited, and then discarded the moment they become inconvenient or outgrow the shadows cast by insecure leaders. It was about trying to rewrite the ending not just for me, but for all of us who'd been told to just be grateful for a seat at the table, even if it was a broken one. That Friday evening, the chaos started to subside a little. Maya and I were sitting out on our small apartment porch. Spring was finally arriving in Denver, the air soft and warm, smelling faintly of damp earth and blooming trees. Streaks of orange and violet painted the sky as the sun went down. "Mom," Maya said, looking up from her phone where she was probably scrolling TikTok. "You're on the news again. Some lady talking about whistleblower protections." I chuckled softly. "Yeah, I saw that. Getting tired of seeing my face everywhere yet?" She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Nope," she said seriously. "Think it's cool. You didn't let them treat you like you didn't matter. You showed them. I kissed the top of her head, feeling the simple, profound weight of her words. What it meant for her, for my daughter, to witness this. To see that you could fight back even against powerful forces. To believe that your voice, your work, your worth mattered. Later that night, exhausted but unable to sleep, I sat at my laptop, scrolling through emails. One caught my eye. It was from a prestigious university back east in Boston. They were formally inviting me to be a keynote speaker at their annual Women in Leadership Summit later that year. The proposed title for my talk, How to Be the Architect of Your Own Power. I stared at the title, Architect of Your Own Power. A few months ago, that would have sounded like meaningless jargon. Now, felt earned. I typed back a simple reply, yes. I would be honored. Not for the spotlight, not for the prestige, but because the message mattered. Because someone somewhere needed to hear that the way things have always been done doesn't mean that's how they have to stay. Change is possible. You just have to be willing to build it. About a month later, the final shoe dropped. Apex Solutions settled all legal claims, mine, and several others that had emerged in the wake of the scandal. It involved a confidential financial resolution for the individuals, which honestly felt secondary at that point. More importantly, it included a formal public apology issued by the board, acknowledging past leadership failures and lapses in ethical oversight. 3 more senior executives, ones implicated in the leaked documents, were announced as resigning. And significantly, as part of the settlement I insisted upon, Apex agreed to install a new fully independent ethics oversight board with real teeth. They committed to publishing quarterly corporate transparency reports. And they agreed to implement robust, externally monitored protections for employees reporting misconduct. Would it fix everything overnight? Of course not. Culture change is slow. But it was a start. A tangible structural change forced by the truth coming to light. Their lawyers tried hard to include a strict non-disclosure clause in my settlement, a confidentiality agreement that would buy my future silence. I declined, politely but firmly. If they thought, after everything that had happened, that they could still buy my silence, well, they really hadn't been paying attention at all. I remained CEO of Chun Strategies. We were heading into our 2nd year, thriving. We had a growing list of incredible clients who valued our ethical approach as much as our strategic insights. We had a reputation built not on hype, but on integrity and results. And we had a waiting list of talented, brilliant people wanting to join our team, wanting to be part of building something different. But most importantly, I stayed visible. I did that keynote speech in Boston. I occasionally commented on industry ethics issues. I told my story carefully and factually when asked. Because stories like mine, they only matter when they're told. They only create change when they remind others, maybe someone listening right now, that you are not alone. That silence isn't the price you have to pay for survival. And that you ultimately get to decide how your story ends and when the next chapter begins. As for me, this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. It was just the beginning. I didn't share all of this just to unload or to look for sympathy. I shared it because I genuinely believe someone out there needs to hear it. Because I spent far too many years of my career being subtly told, and sometimes not so subtly, to stay quiet, to play nice, to not rock the boat, to just be grateful for the scraps I was given. And maybe you've been told the same thing. At your job, maybe in your own family, maybe in other spaces where your voice, your contribution, was desperately needed but never truly welcomed or valued. So, here's what I'd ask of you if you're listening to this. Think about the quiet builders in your own life, in your own workplaces. The ones who make things happen but maybe don't get the spotlight. Support them. Amplify them. And if this story resonated with you, if it sparked something, a memory, a frustration, a feeling of recognition, I'd love it if you'd share that in the comments below. Tell me what part reminded you of your own journey. Let's connect over these shared experiences. Let's turn these individual moments of quiet struggle or quiet strength into a real conversation, maybe even a movement. Because I promise you, I know I wasn't the only Sarah Miller out there fighting these battles. And you aren't alone either. To anyone listening who has ever felt overlooked, undervalued, underestimated, or had their work claimed by someone else, please don't let their definition of your worth become your internal truth. Protect your work. Document everything, keep your own records. Find your allies. Speak your truth when it matters, even if your voice shakes. Know when it's time to walk away and build something better. And never, ever let fear be the reason you settle for less than you deserve. If this story moved you, or sparked something in you, please let me know in the comments. Share your own experience or just tell me what part hit home. Not because I need the validation, truly, but because we all need those reminders that we're not navigating these challenges alone. Our stories have power when we share them. And of course, if you want to hear more stories like this one, stories of quiet courage, of finding clarity after betrayal, of reclaiming personal power in unexpected ways, please subscribe to the channel. This conversation, this journey, it's really only just beginning. And if you feel moved to support the channel further, you can use the super thanks feature below. Giving back, supporting others who are sharing their truth. That's part of the healing process too, I think. Thank you so much for listening. Let's keep building.